Good evening. Hello, my name is Aslan Harris. I'm the Aboriginal Wellbeing Coordinator within the Aboriginal Education Centre here at Federation University. I'm honoured to be asked to come here today to provide an acknowledgement to country on everyone's behalf here. So myself, I'm a proud Noongar man from the southwest of Western Australia, so right in that corner, that bottom corner, in the west of the continent. But my connection to this country, I've lived in Ballarat and surrounding areas for over 25 years, spent most of my life here, studied, went to primary school, high school, and studied with Fed as an alumni. But I have a very strong connection to this country and this community within Ballarat. Especially earlier this year, my daughter was born on this land. And then before that, over the last 15 years, my nephews and nieces have been born on this land as well. So to our family, we have a very strong connection for the rest of our history. And by saying all that, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of this land, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to thank them and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and their ancestors, and thank them for allowing us to be present on their land. And so, in saying that, I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be present. And I'd like to honour my ancestors and everyone's ancestors by playing some didgeridoo. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's now an honour to now welcome and introduce to the stage our Vice-Chancellor and President, Professor Duncan Bentley. Thank you.
So thank you, Aslan, for a wonderful performance and for your acknowledgement of country. I'm Professor Duncan Bentley, the Vice-Chancellor and President of Federation University Australia. And to start today, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet, the Wadawurrung people, and pay our respects to elders past and present, and extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I would like to welcome also our Chancellor, Terry Moran, AC, Federation University Council members, Menzies Foundation Chair, Peter Jopling, AMKC, Menzies Foundation CEO, Liz Gillies, and all the board members of the Menzies Foundation here with us tonight. I would like to warmly welcome our orator for the evening, Kim Williams, AM, Federation University partners, staff and students, and all of our distinguished guests. And all of you are very distinguished, and it's wonderful to have you here with us tonight. And it's wonderful to be able to welcome you to Ballarat. With the sunshine here, I don't know why anyone goes to the Gold Coast, do you? Federation University is immensely proud to be hosting the Menzies Oration for the third occasion as part of our ongoing collaboration with the Menzies Foundation. And we're delighted to have so many guests here this evening at the Emerging Technologies Hub, which is located here at our School of Mines campus in the heart of Ballarat, here since 1870, the third oldest institution of higher education in the country. I'd also like to thank those of you who are here with us this evening via live stream. It's good to have you here, and it's a wonderful thing about technology now that we can have the live stream to millions of people right across the globe. Actually, I don't think there are quite millions of people, but I'm sure that they will tune in afterwards because of the oration we have tonight. The theme for this year's Menzies Oration is the intersection of leadership and truth and its impact on the Australian leadership discourse. And as you would know, as we look around the world at the moment, never before has the importance of truth-telling, transparency, accountability, and trust in leadership been more critical. There are few better qualified to speak on this matter than our guest orator, Kim Williams, AM. Kim's involvement in the arts, entertainment and media industries, both in Australia and abroad, has been immense. He's held various executive leadership positions since the late 70s. He was chief executive at the News Corp Australia, FOXTEL, Fox Studios Australia, the Australian Film Commission, Southern Star Entertainment, Musica Viva Australia, and was also a senior executive at the ABC. Kim is a passionate patron for the arts, as well as being an accomplished musician and composer in his own right. During his distinguished career, he has held roles as chair of the Australian Film Commission, Musica Viva Australia, the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, and the Sydney Opera House Trust. It was for his services to the arts and public policy formulation in the film and television industries that Kim was appointed a member of the Order of Australia in 2006. Kim was awarded a Doctorate of Letters honoris causa by Macquarie University for his contribution to the arts and entertainment industry in Australia and internationally, and is a previous recipient of the Richard Pratt Business Arts Leadership Award from the Australian Business Arts Foundation and the Australian Writers Guild's Dorothy Crawford Award for outstanding contribution to the profession. Earlier this year, Kim was appointed by the Prime Minister of Australia, the Honourable Anthony Albanese, as the 20th chair of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. So given his breadth of experience as a leader within the arts, media and entertainment sectors, we are privileged to have Kim with us this evening to share his extensive insights and experiences as he outlines the essential qualities that underpin effective and ethical leadership in the 21st century. But before we welcome Kim to the stage, I'd like to invite Menzies Foundation CEO Liz Gillies to the lectern to talk about the wonderful work of the Menzies Foundation. Liz, over to you.
It's so wonderful to be here tonight in this incredible venue and back at Federation University. I'd like to thank the really wonderful acknowledgement to country and having acknowledged Indigenous people in the room, would also really like to call out and acknowledge the extraordinary group of Indigenous women that the Menzies Foundation is fortunate enough to work with across rural and remote Australia. When I tell you in a minute a little bit about the Menzies Foundation and why we're just so delighted that Kim agreed to speak tonight, the Menzies Foundation is all about really this idea of how do we all understand our relationship with each other and then be encouraged to act for the greater good. And across all the dimensions of the work of the Foundation, in Australia, in Victoria, in Australia, in the region, the clearest articulation of that is those women sitting around fires in the middle of the desert and talking about their hopes and aspirations for themselves, their families, their communities and the planet. I hear no purer sense or no greater commitment to the greater good than from those women in the Kimberley. So I'd like to acknowledge them for the extraordinary people they are. The Menzies Foundation is dedicated to driving a leadership movement that addresses some of Australia's most pressing challenges. At its core, the Foundation's mission is to elevate leadership beyond individual ambition, fostering a broader commitment, as I've said, to the greater good. We support leadership initiatives across diverse sectors, including school leadership, those amazing Indigenous women, science entrepreneurship, citizen leadership, community resilience, law, and emerging leaders. Each of these initiatives serves as a platform for fostering reflection, growth, and action, equipping leaders to meet complex societal needs. A key initiative under our citizen leadership and community resilience pillar has recently been formed by a report worked as a key part of our collaboration, The Civic Health of Australia, a National Portrait in 30 Charts. And this collaboration with the Australian Leadership Index at Swinburne University highlights the crucial role civic health plays in the well-being of Australian communities. Civic health is defined or reflects how members of a community engage in activities that strengthen both individual and collective well-being, from participating in social activities, in the political process, in volunteering, and indeed even in fostering trust among neighbours. But this report, very starkly in 30 charts, so I suggest and encourage you all to read it because it's eminently accessible, underscores a growing concern over the decline in civic engagement, social cohesion and volunteering across the nation. While Australians maintain resilience and a belief in the imperative of social trust, there is a concerning drop in political engagement and civic participation. These findings point to an urgent need for renewed efforts to strengthen Australia's civic fabric and return trust in institutions. By addressing these challenges, the Foundation continues its mission of supporting leadership that not only fosters leaders, but increasingly important, focuses on leadership and the role that each of us play in that, in our aspiration to encourage and to support a more connected, engaged and resilient society where every citizen is empowered, motivated and able to contribute to the greater good. We believe, as I've said, that leadership is not just about individual success. The day of the leader is increasingly anachronistic. Increasingly, it's about how individuals collectively come together to contribute to stronger, more resilient communities. By focusing on leadership from both practical, on-the-ground perspectives and our longer-term ambitious goals, the Foundation aims to catalyse a change across all levels of Australian life. Our efforts encourage Australians to engage with leadership in all its forms, whether in schools, communities or in the society more broadly. However, leadership today faces new challenges. In an era where truth is increasingly clouded by misinformation, propaganda and sensationalism, the need for clarity, transparency, accountability and trust in leadership has never been more critical. These principles form the foundation of effective leadership, essential for maintaining public trust and fostering integrity in an ever-increasingly complex world. And that's why we're just so delighted that Kim Williams agreed to be the Menzies Orator tonight. It feels in some ways, Kim, like there is no more important time than to hear your thoughts about those words: clarity, transparency, accountability and trust. So we've heard Kim's extensive CV, and Kim, I've got pages of it. Luckily, I'm not going to repeat it. But what I really want to say is when Kim shares his thoughts tonight, the message that we really hope that you take with you is the role that each of you play in a different idea of the greater good and the contribution that you can make to it. We ask all Australians to focus on their purpose, the values and principles that underpin that. In doing so, to understand our collective responsibility to each other. And then we ask you all to act for the greater good. What Kim's contribution tonight will start to establish the parameters within each of you can think and act, as I said, as we work towards trust, resilience and a positive and optimistic view of the future. Kim, it takes me great pleasure to welcome you to the stage.
Thank you, Liz Gillies, and the CEO of the Menzies Foundation, and Duncan Bentley, the Vice-Chancellor and President of Federation University, for your particularly warm and generous welcome. Thank you also, Aslan, for your splendid welcome to country. Colleagues, in this gathering at Federation University celebrating the legacy of Sir Robert Menzies and the foundation created in his name, I offer my respect and greetings to friends of knowledge, universities, and the ancient devotion to scholars and study. In particular, I salute colleagues and friends, the Chancellor Terry Moran, AC, Peter Jopling, AMKC, Chair of the Menzies Foundation, Board Member Catherine Greiner, AO, and their academic board and executive colleagues. You all do fine, indeed vital work in the national interest. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians on these ancestral lands, the Wadawurrung and Djadjawurrung people, and recognise their enduring connection to the land and waterways around us. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to the elders of other Indigenous communities in Australia. I also take this moment to acknowledge the diverse peoples and cultures who have been welcomed to this nation, along with the laws, freedoms, rights and faiths they have brought or represent. Acknowledging this is crucial given the never-ending assault on difference, which too often permeates societies today. Institutions like Federation University and the Menzies Foundation are physical embodiments of the qualities that hold society together and secure our freedoms. History lives here, culture lives here, democracy lives here. The future will come from here. As the son-in-law of Gough Whitlam, it was with some surprise, but also, I might add, delight, to be asked to give this year's Menzies Oration by Peter Jopling. In this world of increasingly bitter bipartisanship, symbolically uniting two contending clans of yesteryear seems an inspired move. If only they could do this in the United States. If in a couple of decades from now the descendants of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are able to get together and imitate our example, seeing some good in each other and even saying nice things, we will know that civilization is for the time being safe. Despite their differences, Whitlam and Menzies, those two titans of Australian politics, had much in common. Both amongst the best young lawyers of their day, they were equally great orators, original and erudite, with equal doses of confident rhetorical flourish and wit. While Whitlam didn't attend Wesley College like Menzies, his father, Fred, a noted jurist, did. Whitlam studied classics at university. Menzies failed Latin at school. Everyone knows how difficult a subject that is. They both made their political parties. Menzies ab initio with the Liberal Party, Whitlam reimagining the ALP after the split and federal intervention in Victoria. They were both shy men, something many will find hard to believe, but it's true. They both had at times a riotous sense of humour. As this is the Menzies Oration, I won't invoke Gough's wit, but rather revert to three examples from the 2019 Speakers Lecture given by historian, journalist and Menzies biographer Troy Bramston. Menzies gained a reputation for his sharp wit, which was not always to his advantage, even if it won a few laughs. A woman once said to Menzies, "I wouldn't vote for you if you were the Archangel Gabriel." Menzies replied, "If I were the Archangel Gabriel, madam, I'm afraid you would not be in my constituency." A miner once interjected, "Tell us all you know, Bob. It won't take long." Menzies responded, "I'll tell you everything we both know. It won't take any longer." A man yelled out at a public meeting, "What you gonna do with housing, Bob?" Menzies replied without missing a beat, "Put an H in front of it." Menzies and Whitlam were both formidable, electoral campaigners. Despite their, at times, diametrically opposed views, both respected each other and observed their opponents with keen attention. Perhaps most importantly, they were both great parliamentarians and believed deeply in the authority of Parliament and the accountability of governments to Parliament. They believed in rules, standards, the law, democracy. To sum it up, they were true believers, committed reformers and strong leaders without being divisive populists, which means they're the sort of leaders much of the world could use right now. It's the sort of leadership the Menzies Foundation is pursuing with its scholarships and innovative and inclusive leadership programs, and I want to applaud you for undertaking it. This is what I want to reflect upon today, the urgent need for true democratic leadership in an increasingly dangerous world. My argument is that in a world of increasing political division marked by misinformation and disinformation, defending the truth matters, defending public institutions matters, maintaining civility matters. And for these reasons, great public bodies like the ABC matter more than ever before. Sir Robert Menzies was clearly no dedicated fan of the ABC and had reservations about its news and current affairs, generated by the pressures of the Cold War with its domino theories and Red Scares, but he at least tolerated it and paid it due respect. The criticism the ABC received back in Menzies' times seems tame compared to the excoriation and even repression the global media has received in our own time. This is not wholly surprising, given that in the 1950s and 60s, its management and board were firmly in the hands of conservative people. But as we know, respecting national institutions was something that came naturally to Sir Robert. And the respect has been repaid in kind. In 2016, the ABC broadcast a two-part documentary, John Howard on Menzies, Building Modern Australia, which has helped a new generation understand the politics and leadership in those times. The ABC Education website, which is primarily designed to support teachers and students, has mapped content on Menzies and his era to the Australian history curriculum. In preparing for this speech today, I watched a piece on the importance that Menzies put on promoting home ownership as a means to ensuring social cohesion. It's a policy priority which still resonates strongly today, quite clearly. Another of my themes today will be the need to unite city and country. Sir Robert possessed a very real sense of regional Australia. Similar could be said of his contemporaries, Joseph Lyons and Ben Chifley. Being from Japarat and educated partly here in Ballarat, it came naturally to him to understand the beliefs, cultural priorities and political pressures coming from the bush. With geographical cultural divides playing an ever-increasing role in shaping our politics, the importance of successfully combating and managing cultural discord, listening to everyone and reflecting their views needs to be understood again. I come to the ABC with the utmost determination to ensure that it is an organisation all Australians, regardless of where they live, what they believe or where they vote, can look towards with pride and trust and anticipation of what it can offer. To do this, the ABC can't be about left or right or even centre. It must be about quality, creativity and the truth. Factualness must be our watchword. The ABC must set the standard for broadcasting quality, journalistic ethics and factual news. It must inspire Australians to be all they can be, to be as creative, as intelligent and as good as they can be. The ABC may never have the resources of a BBC or a CNN, but it can and must be an exemplar in diverse media delivery and in news quality. of intellectual ambition, of creativity, of the values Australians hold dear. It must help Australians develop a new national outlook that will help us navigate the dangerous world in which we're now living, a world in which the misuse of information and the distortion of culture poses such a grave threat to democracy. I want it to be the mirror, the camera and the microphone of Australia, an accurate reflector, recorder and amplifier of all that we are and believe in. I want it to remain an organisation all Australians can trust and which the world can respect. How do we ensure this? That is the mission of my board colleagues and the mission for all at the ABC. Let's start from an acknowledgement of realities. The ABC has critics, many of them political, and these tend to come from the political right. I don't agree with all of the right's criticisms, just as I don't agree with all of the left's criticisms, or for that matter, praise. But I take them seriously, very seriously. That a sizable proportion of national decision makers and national opinion think something is amiss is something that cannot be ignored. I said recently in my Sir John Monash oration, the ABC is not in competition with the commercial newsrooms. We are in an alliance with them to create an informed, democratic citizenry. Playing party politics, that simply can't be part of our business. If we can get all sides of politics backing a renewed ABC, imagine what a boon it would be for our sense of cohesion and creativity as a nation, to the strength of our democracy, to our image in the world as a nation of intelligence, as a nation with a big future. Here is what I believe. I believe the ABC should be reliably politically non-partisan. I don't say politically neutral because I believe it should be politically positive in the sense that it always backs democracy, always backs freedom, and always backs Australia's national interests in ways consistent with telling the full truth. In the long term, the full truth is always in our national interest. There are three ways the ABC should act to make itself an even greater source of pride and strength for every Australian. The first is its pursuit of our national interests by helping us create a safer world, especially in our own region. In my recent address to the Lowy Institute, I outlined the great work the ABC is doing, aiding the development of serious media coverage about democracy and civil society in the nations of the Indo-Pacific. Nothing could be more in Australia's long-term national interests than helping make our region one which stands for democracy and peaceful cooperation, a region where the truth triumphs over misinformation and disinformation. In this work, we are building on the Menzies legacy. In 1939, Menzies established the nation's first international broadcast service, Australia Calling, the forerunner of Radio Australia. Across our region, assisted by Australian government funding and aid organisations, we're delivering news and assisting local media organisations in the creation of a democratic media peopled by well-trained professional journalists. You'll see such local journalists now appearing frequently on our news and current affairs programming. This is truly a project worthy of a democratic media organisation like the ABC. The second way we can make ourselves a source of even greater pride and strength is the promotion of the truth in a world of increasing lies, to provide a counterbalance to the destructive effusion of misinformation and lies that are doing such harm to democracy and freedom right around the world. Without truth, there can be no democracy. In the simplest terms, for our democratic deliberations to have meaning, we must be deliberating over accepted facts. Without accepted facts, we are talking past each other, not debating with each other. This is something our nation needs to discuss, especially now as the great controversy relating to what constitutes the truth swirls around the United States election and the conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East. This is a subject examined at length by Yale historian and linguistic polymath Timothy Snyder in his new book on freedom, which I can wholeheartedly recommend to those of you wanting to come to grips with the dangers of the present world. Snyder sees the truth, which he calls factuality, as one of the 5 necessary conditions for the flourishing of freedom. His claim, in essence, is that without facts, meaningful argument and political and societal progress become impossible. In a world of uncertain facts, our political system descends into a slanging match and our society into stagnation. The domination of falsity has serious implications because it prevents us from getting a grip on reality. As he puts it, falsity doesn't deal with how the world actually works. Snyder provides the most obvious example of this in climate change. We can wish science away, but to do so is futile, foolish, and ultimately counterproductive. Its scientific truth must be reported. He gives a further example upon which I think we can all agree. Hitler's contention that Germany lost the First World War, because it was stabbed in the back by Jews, led, he says, to the disastrous fallacy that Germany could win a war on 2 fronts with America involved. As he remarks about this, sometimes a big lie can bring down a whole country. By contrast, facts allow us to pursue personal sovereignty and therefore freedom because they allow people to make decisions on their own without having to rely on the assertions of authorities, often authoritarian ones. In a free society, we don't need dictators and billionaires and strongmen to tell us what to believe. We can determine it independently through our use of reason and by investigating the truth for ourselves. As Snyder puts it in his other excellent recent book, On Tyranny, to abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, then no one can criticise power because there is no basis on which to do so. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle, and the biggest wallet pays for the most blinding lights. The behaviour of the billionaire owners of major newspapers in the United States in the last week is maybe a warning. So there's much at stake in the defence of truth, in the defence of facts. How do we maintain the dominance of facts in this world of easily manufactured lies? There are things we as citizens must do. I quote Snyder again from On Tyranny. Figure things out for yourself. Spend more time on long articles. Subsidise investigative journalism by subscribing to print media. Realise that some of what is on the internet is there deliberately to harm you. But Snyder argues strongly that ensuring that facts win out requires more than our eternal vigilance. It needs positive action from government and society. Negative action, such as restraining lies, is not enough. And of course, framing laws to determine what is misleading and not has potential risks for freedom of speech. The best positive step we can make is by increasing investment in journalism. We must fight fire with fire, disinformation with truth, the only antidote. Liars with well-trained journalists. Funding is a matter for government, of course, but it's my belief that as the need to combat the organised lying by democracy's enemies becomes more and more obvious, all sides of politics will come to recognise the good sense of properly funding not just the ABC, but of helping news organisations of all types flourish. Investing in factuality is maybe the most important investment our democracy can make, and that's a proposition all sides of any great democracy like ours should accept. No news organisation is perfect. The ABC doesn't claim to be perfect by any means. Perfection is something no news organisation can ever hope to obtain. But it is also something every news organisation should strive to achieve. Believe me when I say, under my leadership, the ABC will strive for objectivity and high journalistic standards at all times. When such qualities are doubted, there will be investigations with answers and accountability. I do not hold the fashionable position that bias is acceptable and inescapable, and that journalists have the right to express their personal political beliefs and pursue their personal political causes in their work as objective journalists. That alternate view may sound progressive or liberating, but as I have argued, is ultimately damaging to our liberty. We must be aware of our biases and awake to them at all times. At the ABC, the only thing we must unreservedly and passionately campaign for is the dogged pursuit of the truth. Objectivity is our end, our motivation, our Bible, and our fight. People who want to pursue personal and political causes cannot do so at the ABC. This pursuit of the truth, this determination to uncover lies and present citizens with the facts, requires us to invest more in investigative reporting. As Snyder puts it, ultimately, to resist the few big lies, we will need to produce millions of little truths. The ABC's investigative reporting is making a dent in that figure, uncovering lying, organised theft, and the abuse of vulnerable citizens. In September, the Four Corners episode Strata Trap, fronted by Linton Besser, revealed the extent of hidden charges, phantom fees, suspect deals and kickbacks that plague the strata title industry, building on work first aired on the 7:30 report in March. As a result of our reporting, insurer Steadfast went into a trading halt. The ACCC chair called for a ban on strata insurance commissions. The New South Wales Strata and Property Services Commissioner has been stood aside pending an investigation, and there are now calls for a federal inquiry. This comes in addition to the strata reforms announced by the New South Wales Government in June following 7:30's initial reporting. An ongoing set of investigations into financial abuse in retirement villages, led by Adele Ferguson of the investigative reporting team, has highlighted how vulnerable residents were being forced out of villages and aged care homes, sometimes losing their life savings, a terrible and shameful injustice. The investigation, which has spread across Four Corners, 7:30 and other media, has seen operators investigated, public calls for more consumer protections and federal action to stamp out bad behaviour. We hope a public call-out will generate more coverage, and the state newsrooms are also looking at follow-ups. Anne Connolly's work on public trustees and the NDIS was also outstanding, as was Paul Farrell and the background briefing team for their background briefing, Stop and Search. And finally, as but one of many, many examples, ABC News Perth and WA's youth justice crisis, The Death of Cleveland Dodd, was an exceptional piece of public interest work. In response to a clear and growing need, I'm delighted that in September we announced a new state and territory investigative news team to conduct more of this vital work across regional Australia, which has seen such depletion of media in recent years. It's my hope that the ABC's lead will propel Australian investigative reporting to new heights, to the benefit of the Australian people and long-term interest of Australian democracy. The third area that will enable the ABC to develop support across the board is in our core role as the premier broadcaster for regional Australia. A nation as large, diverse and geographically far-flung as ours must be knitted together by information. Why is this such a profound duty? Again, Snyder has something interesting to say. Perceptively, he points out that the importance of something historians and philosophers don't normally discuss: local news. One of Snyder's strongest adolescent memories is the existence of local newspapers, something sadly we don't see much anymore. He remembers their stories of local achievement, local change, and even local misrule. Local news, he perceptively observes, allow us to get a picture of the true diversity of our nation at the level of the municipalities, towns, farms, and individual people, without losing the sense of what makes us essentially the same people. Without factual local reporting, our knowledge of each other can become nothing other than cliched parody, us and them, a distortion of exaggerations and lies often manufactured to serve nefarious political or commercial objectives. In the United States, a lack of true knowledge of each other has contributed to the creation of a divided polity. As Barack Obama famously said, it divides Americans into red states and blue states when they really should be the United States. In Australia, ignorance and misinformation divides us into monikers like latte sippers and rednecks, and those who live either side of hipster-proof fences, abstract, unprovable nonsense. In this sad situation, how can we prevent our country from losing sight of the fact that we are all essentially similar human beings whose shared citizenship, common characteristics, similar beliefs and aspirations for the next generation far outweigh our differences? How do we maintain our unity and cohesion and national strength? How do we retain our sense of democratic patriotism? Maintaining our commonality and national cohesion is a major duty of government, especially in this dangerous world which, as I've already argued, is being undermined by a determined and ongoing assault on the truth. We must not become us and them. We must remain Australians, all of us, free, equal, respectful, together, creative. Sadly, Snyder's lament over the disappearance of local sources of news portrays a reality that is worsening with every passing year as local reporting retreats in the face of hard commercial realities from massive technology change. As you will know, the state of independent news in the regions is getting dire. All over Australia, as all over the world, the old media revenue and delivery model is collapsing. When Facebook and Meta gobble up 70% digital advertising revenue, and when digital delivery is axiomatic to consumption, how can news organisations afford the luxury of having reporters in each region using antiquated media delivery? I urge all parties to continue to pursue the digital titans for a fair cut of the revenues drained from mainstream journalism, the loss of which hurts the regions even more than the cities. The Joint Select Committee on Social Media and Australian Society is investigating ways to fund public interest journalism in the face of Meta's attempt, or intention I should say, to exit the news media bargaining code. In my view, secure progress on this is a mainstream democratic imperative. The tech giants will complain, of course, but chipping into the common wheel is a small price to pay for the highly profitable privilege of running media organisations in free democratic countries with modern infrastructure. We must find ways of replenishing the newsrooms outside of the major cities and population centres. One obvious way presents itself, properly funding the ABC. No matter where they live, Australians need information, entertainment, news and analysis. Shared factual news and shared creative culture make us one people. And while local printed physical newspapers may not be salvageable, we can fill the hole digitally through the internet, streaming, downloads, and radio and television. Every reasonable person, regardless of their politics, understands this. In my role, I talk a lot to politicians, and I don't think I'm breaching any confidences to reveal that I have not yet met a minister or MP or senator representing regional Australia who in private won't concede the absolutely priceless value of ABC services to their community, whether it's providing vital emergency alerts and broadcasts or news they can trust, or portraying and celebrating their constituents accurately to people who live in metropolitan Australia. We're incredibly proud of the services we provide to regional Australia. No ABC, no common understanding. No common understanding, no unified nation. We devote considerable resources to maintaining our news services in the bush. The need for a strong regional ABC is clear. We're a highly urbanised nation, yes, but I think many Australians don't realise just how many of us live outside the capital cities. As you will all know, the figure is 28%, some 7 million of us. Servicing those citizens inclusively is a big part of what the ABC does. We operate from 58 locations across Australia, using more than 600 staff who are spread far and wide in the regions. Needless to say, this is by far the biggest footprint of any media organisation in Australia. To give you a sense of what we do, we have 40 ABC regional radio locations, many of which are the only radio stations available. And with streaming and on-demand offerings through ABC Listen and ABC iView, you can access all that the ABC offers everywhere in Australia. Our regional teams provide 800 hours of unique radio programming weekly, with 43 breakfast programs, plus numerous morning, drive and evening shows. Our regional programming is some of the longest running, not just here, but around the world. The Country Hour will have its 80th anniversary of continuous production and transmission on the ABC next year, making it one of the oldest ongoing programs anywhere in the world. Landline, Country Breakfast, Countrywide, Australia-wide, Australia all over, the list goes on. Last year, we activated 659 emergency broadcast events. Floods, fires, tropical cyclones, whatever the source of danger, people go to the ABC for this sort of life-saving news. And the ABC is doing its very best to keep regional news gathering alive. The money we receive from the tech giants through the federal government's media bargaining code has allowed us to add an additional 60 extra journalists to regional centres, and we've guaranteed those positions will be sustained into the future, regardless of any negative actions from the tech platforms. But all of this is only part of the way the ABC is helping hold the nation together. Every part of our continent and its people are included in our light entertainment and drama programming. There's nothing city-centric about it. Australian Story, Great Australian Stuff, Muster Dogs, Extraordinary Things, Total Control, Return to Paradise, Grand Designs Australia, Bay of Fires, Mystery Road, Rosehaven, Frey, Fisk, I could go on. All assiduously portray the culture, history, physical beauty and people of rural and regional Australia, reminding us that we may be many, but we are truly one. one. The ABC knows the absolute importance of recognising the profound effect of regional life on the development of our national culture. This, of course, includes non-urban Indigenous culture and the profound contribution of regional industries to our economic strength. In September, we brought back Triple J's One Night Stand that saw 15,000 music fans headed to Warrnambool in Victoria to a local musical lineup. The sold-out event not only meant we could partner with Support Act to provide a much-needed platform for the local music industry and creative economy, but also gave us great content for both Triple J and ABC iView. Think also of the wonderful Backroads, now in its 10th year. If ever there was a program designed to bring Australians together, Backroads is it. As the show's presenters, led so wonderfully for many years by Heather Hewitt, and soon to be led by Lisa Miller, makes its way around Australia, they find no cafe latte haters. Good coffee seems to be everywhere. No angry rednecks, no hipster-proof fensters, no red states and no blue states, just Australians doing their best to get along, respect each other and keep their communities alive. Maybe rebuilding their local country pub as a gathering place for their community, renewing neglected land, holding music festivals, setting up tourism industries, promoting reconciliation, welcoming and giving jobs to refugees, keeping traditional industries viable, generally putting aside the differences and getting on with things. You may not have noticed, but it never seems to occur to Heather and Lisa and their guest presenters to ask the people they meet how they vote or what their political beliefs are. It's not relevant to simple sharing. There's a light-heartedness about this work, but it's nonetheless exceptionally important. Australian Story offers a similar narrative with the remarkably positive, popular, and yes, deeply loved Lee Sales and that amazing creative production team that illuminate diverse stories across the nation, uniting us with stories of triumph over travail, simple celebrations of what it means to be an Australian in the 21st century. Of all Australia's many fine media organisations, only the ABC has the ambition, resources and reach to bring the nation together in this way. With greater resources, it could do even more. This is a proposition I believe all sides of politics can support and must support in this era where the truth and therefore democracy are under siege. We are living in momentous times, you might say in a momentous week, a handful of days that for good or ill have the potential to significantly alter the fate of nations. A period when journalists and news platforms are being tested as never before. Some are standing tall, others, including some famous mastheads and digital platforms, are crouching low, neglecting their calling, practicing what Snyder would call anticipatory obedience. As Snyder tells us, when the truth is replaced by falsity, disaster follows. Disaster follows too when journalists react to intimidation with compliance. That's why, hopefully, the one thing the ABC will never lack is the will and courage to defend the truth, without which the whole journalistic profession is, frankly, nothing, and democracy becomes nothing. This, dare I say it, is a project that not just Sir Robert Menzies, but also Gough Whitlam would support on a unity ticket, one devoted to democratic values, positive purpose and social cohesion, a devotion to seek a better Australian democracy for all our citizens. Thank you. Microphone's willing. I believe we're now going to have questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Kim. That was an amazing presentation to us today, for your insights and sharing all this information for us. More importantly, just to hear your perspectives has been amazing, but also to hear the core leadership principles and pillars that you highlighted to us, such as the truth, creativity and quality. They really resonated, so thank you so much for your presentation. Now, we've got some questions from our online audience that have been submitted, and then we'll come out to the audience here. So if you're happy, I'll start with my first question. What role do you think educational institutions, including universities, should play in supporting media literacy?
I think education institutions have an enormously important role in addressing misinformation and disinformation. It won't surprise any of you that the ABC has in its education resources very, very comprehensive explainers on misinformation and disinformation for school students, and they are some of the most regularly visited elements of ABC explainers on ABC websites, and are very actively used by teachers across the length and breadth of Australia in public and independent schools, and in the Catholic education system equally. The ABC provisions to all of those education systems and cooperates with all of the, as is required by law under the ABC Act, with all of the state education authorities across the length and breadth of Australia. Very, very active, never-ending dialogue with those governance authorities in education and the ABC. In terms of universities, I think universities can lift their game in dealing with misinformation and disinformation, and should do so. I think we are all far too polite and tolerant of bad behaviour with information, and I think we need much corrective, curative action in order to redirect our society where truth is valued and where truth is seen to matter.
Thank you. I've got a second question here. So given the ease in which misinformation can be served up to the population via social media, should the Commonwealth be doing more to deter this? A free pass is one thing, but what about the social media?
Well, social media is certainly a very active and deeply influential element in our society today, probably very much more potent with young Australians and next generation Australians than with many of the people in this room. The impact of social media on the young is, I think, one of the biggest single challenges to social cohesion in our nation, and one of the great exacerbants of many of the mental health problems that we see in our young. Social media, regrettably, having initially offered what was seen to be a democratisation of information and a liberation of citizens to express themselves, has become nothing more or less than an emotional, political and fact sewer. And people, sadly, become consumed by what can only be seen as having all of the similar health aspects of a very fast-flowing sewer. I think that's deeply worrying, and I think it's something which governments must address. And I think some of the initiatives that are being discussed presently in terms of access to mobile phones in schools, access to social media for the young below determined ages, are in fact very necessary initiatives. I don't know about all of you, but when I grew up, I was not allowed to watch television from Monday through Friday. It was a very special treat that on Friday night we got to watch television. And frankly, I'm a voracious book reader. I think most of that derives from the fact I wasn't allowed to watch television, so I fell in love with reading. And in fact, both my parents are no longer with us, but my mother observed that after a few months of being able to watch television, because we didn't have a television until 1965, so I would have, you know, I was a teenager then, very early teenager. So when we were allowed to watch the television, I got a bit bored after a while with it and went back to books. I've made up for it as an adult, but I think a lot of the propositions that are being put forward are in fact consistent with the past, because that kind of disciplinary intervention on the part of parents with their children was commonplace in my era. I was allowed to listen to the radio, and I was an Argonaut. I normally have a really good memory. I can't remember my call sign, and I've tried to ferret it out from old books and things, but I can't remember. I was Sirius something, but I've forgotten what my number was. But the Argonauts were tremendously important for me, and of course that was the sort of programming that really stimulated thinking and challenged you and introduced all sorts of story horizons and information horizons to children that was utterly liberating. You know, people forget Geoffrey Smart was Phidias on the television iteration when we moved across into television from the Argonauts. But he'd been an oral Argonaut before that. That's how he, you know, when he was a struggling artist, made his living. These are important things to recall. You know, there's a lot to recommend those sorts of interventions, I think. I know it's controversial. I know a lot of people deeply disagree with me, but I say long live parents intervening.
Thank you. Final question from the online space. Younger generations now rely almost exclusively on social media and media on demand for information. How will traditional news publications survive in this environment?
Well, I think the response to most things in modern society for a body like the ABC, which is the only one that I really can speak with any authorisation about, is to do better work. Go where the people are, you know, fish where the fish are. So the ABC has an absolute social obligation, has a legislative obligation, has an editorial obligation to go into those domains and provide the best antidote to falsity, and that is truthfulness, factuality. These are very important concepts. And to do so in ways that is entertaining, that is engaging, that is compelling, that can actually... You know, the truth is not boring. The truth is endlessly interesting.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the audience today? Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Marvellous speech. This may sound very naive, but why can't the government make the platforms, the tech platforms, responsible in the same way that media are for their content? That seems to me the biggest problem with the platforms. They take all the advertising revenue and they claim we're a tech platform or a phone system. We're not responsible for the content. If they were, things would change completely.
Well, the problem is that, of course, they don't operate under any licensing regime from government, so that they operate under the general law, so that they are subject to censorship provisions that the general law has. But beyond that, they are not licensed transmitters of editorial content in the same way that broadcasters are. I might add that you know, newspapers are not are not subject to any kind of regulatory overview or oversight either. But obviously they, in anticipation that there's always the possibility that that might happen, they do have the Australian Press Council, which I'd have to say, having dealt with policy issues in that domain extensively, is a bit of a toothless tiger, but at least it exists. But there is no intervention possibility for government at law. There's no head of power that actually relates to it. Further, in relation to the News Media Bargaining Code, the US makes very strenuous interventions, saying that any intervention to require obligated payments is in fact an offence against the US Free Trade Agreement with Australia. So it's a complicated space.
Kim, there are two types of people in Australia. There are people who are rusted on and love the ABC, and there are people, as described by Fran Kelly in her Andrew Olley lecture last week, who just hate it with a passion, absolutely hate it with a passion, in a way that you don't see for other media outlets. What can the ABC do about that? Or should it do anything, or just accept that they are as they are?
As I said before, I think the response to most criticism, and you know, there's a lot of very severe criticism, is to do better work and to persist. I don't think that one should always look at the validity of criticism, of course, and one should always treat critics and treat the feedback that comes from the public with respect. Sometimes that requires, I have to assure you, a very deep breath. The unhinged nature of some of the feedback I received directly would take your breath away. I mean, you would really, you would recoil in genuine horror at some of the severity of the feedback that I receive. And from some people on a serial basis. You know, there are several dozen people who would write to me 3 times a week. It's weird. But I say to all my colleagues, look, be responsive, be polite, be respectful. The ABC is owned by all Australians. It's accountable to all Australians. I do internally often say, except for mad people, and that we should just double down on doing really great work. And the best response in most instances is to perform in a way that is always aiming to, you know, striving for better and better and better. And do we have a long way to go? You betcha.
Thanks very much for your really informative lecture on truth and leadership. I was wondering if you could reflect on the recent report by Terry Janke into systemic racism at the ABC and the implications of that report on the ABC's commitment to reconciliation, particularly its Reconciliation Action Plan. Thanks.
The report was clearly a very had a very dynamic impact on the board of the ABC and on the leadership groupings at the ABC. The board treated it with the necessary seriousness that it deserves. There are a number of contextual things, if you've read the report, that I would encourage you to look at, particularly in terms of the statistics on the responses. It is drawing from feedback from a relatively small cohort inside the ABC, which is not in any way to diminish the statements that have been made and the very real lived experience that is spoken about. There were 15 recommendations. We have embraced an action plan that responds to each and every one of those 15 recommendations, and we have made a senior executive appointment to the senior leadership team with a relevant, qualified and very energetic First Nations person who has worked at the ABC for a long time, I might add. And the ABC is, of course, one of the larger employers of First Nations Australians in the Commonwealth. In fact, I think our employment of First Nations Australians is exactly on the percentage of First Nations people in our country, as it should be. The process for achieving behavioural change in each and every instance of unacceptable behaviour will take time. Often these things are an outcome from unconscious bias, and unconscious bias is a notoriously difficult thing to address. It's been a very difficult thing to address, and I think it still is, in our court system. It's a difficult thing to address in policy determination, and it requires a lot of reflection and a lot of hypersensitivity in order to address it. But I take the report as being a report that will be an invaluable tool in actually getting the ABC to be a real leader in media. I think it is already, incidentally. You might have noticed that other media carried very little information about the Janke Review. I had said to some of my colleagues that I thought it unlikely that we would see a profusion of comment, even from some of the traditional forces of what I might call dedicated hostility. They were very, very light-touch commentators about it, because people who live in glass houses and any number of other epithets that one could apply meant that people stood right back. Now, that we're not standing back. We are not standing back at all. The whole report was published. The whole report is available on the website. The response of the ABC board is on the website. The 15 items are all published. There's a whole action program. I met with our Bonner committee. Many of you will remember Neville Bonner. I think we're all of a common age where people will remember Neville. I'm told the members of the Bonner committee that back in a long time ago, back in the 1980s, I often drove Neville to his motel where he used to stay in Sydney. And so the Bonner Committee is our consultative body with First Nations people inside the ABC. And I met with them last week. I'd been overseas for a week, and first day I was back, I had a 2-hour meeting with them. We'll keep on, and we'll persist, and we will change.
Thank you.
Kim, thank you very much for your insights tonight, and for your incredible legacy to Australian media and the arts. It's people like you that make Australia a better place. And Australia does talk about advancing Australia fair, and I'm curious to get your comments on the concept of fairness. More than half my life ago, I was told as a young journalist, seek out the truth, but be fair. I worry these days that journalists sometimes put fairness above the truth and seek to get both sides of a view rather than report just what's true. So yeah, I'd love to get your concept.
You raise a very important point there. I think one of the most, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that's all. Yeah, thank you.
I think you raise a very important point, because I think one of the most serious dilemmas in media is the issue of false equivalence. Simply because someone says something doesn't make it so and doesn't make it reportable. Simply making a statement is not, no matter how famous you are, no matter how storied is your history, if it is something that you know to be untrue, it doesn't mean that you need to report it. It's in many jurisdictions it's called both-sidism. I think false equivalence is a much better descriptor. And I'll go back to climate change. Now, I know there are people who say climate change is contested. Guess what? It's not. 99% of the world's scientists indicate that there is serious disruption in the world's weather patterns and that it is statistically getting worse. And they study it for a living. And most of them have PhDs. And they really do it seriously as scientists applying the scientific method, bringing all of that magnificent scepticism about data that is so core to scientific method. You can't just say, well, I just say that's not so. Well, you can say it, but that doesn't mean it's a reportable matter. And too often, there's this thumping of the table that people are not being properly reported is, in the instance of something like climate change, is just not acceptable. And I think in unemotional, proper traditions of objective reporting, that needs to be said.
Kim, over this way, in a similar vein to the question from Daniel, I'm interested in the objectivity and reporting of facts as you describe. And as you've just used an example of climate change, that's very clear. But in that objectivity and perspective, there may be room for more than one truth. And I wonder how it is you manage perspective in a situation where there are more than one truth, is more than one truth.
Well, I think it's probably more accurate to say more than one perspective. Hard work will usually arrive at a truth. You know, I have a long-standing statement that there's never any such thing as a difficult problem. They're quite rare. There's only ever difficult people. You know, most problems have natural solution paths. They may take a lot of work to arrive at, but they are resolvable. But boy, there are a lot of difficult people. Ask Galileo. So yes, there were other truths. You know, ask Darwin. You know, read the book by the Australian historian Ian McCalman, Darwin's Armada, about the way in which Huxley and Hooper and one of the other great scientists at the time gathered around to actually prepare the ground for something like a year and a half before the Voyage of the Beagle was published and the subsequent volumes, because they were just terrified that the accusations of heresy would prevent people digesting the science and the intensity of the investigation and the observation that Darwin, and separately, in fairness to him, Alfred Wallace, had both devoted to actually figuring stuff out.
Thank you. I think we'll finish up there. Thank you so much, Kim. I would like to say thank you for your presentation and your time today. Thank you, Liz, for the information and the sharing around the Menzies Foundation. Thank you for the Foundation's support for today. Also, thank you for our acknowledgement to country. That was very authentic, so thank you so much. We're very grateful that you're here, and we really appreciate the honesty and the integrity in what's been demonstrated today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.